Hi guys, welcome back to Pinnacle Healthcare Staffing's Get to Know a Nurse. My name's Janae, as many of you probably know by now. Today I am with Kristen Gilmore. Kristen has been in Philly nursing for over 20
Yep.
years. I'm excited to talk through your resume because I feel like you've really kind of touched on every little part, and now you're in such a cool role in something that we find so important, which is the nurse wellness side. So tell us about yourself. Tell us your story.
Yeah, awesome. Well, thank you, Janae, so much for having me here today. I'm super excited to be
You're
here.
so welcome.
I'm really excited to share not just my personal story and journey in nursing, but to really highlight all the work that's being done in the well-being space for nursing, because to your point, it's really so important for the profession. So
Yeah,
thank you again for having me.
of course.
So a little bit about myself. I guess we're talking about my professional journey. I started off in nursing school. I went to Holy Family University in the
Mm-hmm.
Northeast, and it was very typical during that period of time when I went to nursing school that many of us started working in hospitals while we were in school, either as nursing assistants or in some other capacity. So I had the wonderful opportunity to do that. And during that time, I also was, of course, doing clinicals in hospitals.
Mm-hmm.
And my senior year was really a pivotal point in my nursing career. And I will always share with folks that a lot of like what happened to me as a nurse was due to opportunities
Mm-hmm.
and other people. And mind you, I was not, interview ready. I was
Mm-hmm.
wearing my nursing school scrubs. My hair was probably
Right.
in a ponytail. Like I was
Right.
not anticipating that in that day. And walked me down. I met the nurse recruiter, and she was lovely. And she knew that I was working at another hospital as a nurse extern. And she said, "Well, would you maybe want to work in our emergency room before you graduate?" And I said, "Oh my gosh, I would love to do that." She said, "Well, let's walk down there."
Let's give you a
Yes.
tour.
So we walked down to the emergency department at Einstein, and she said, "How about we meet one of the nurse managers?" And I said, "That'd be great." So she introduced me to the nurse manager, and she said, "Well, would you want to be like a per diem ER tech here?" And I said, "Oh my gosh, I would love that." And that is how it happened.
I love
I
that.
know.
Networking.
Yes.
Networking.
And here I am thinking I'm just going into clinical one day, and I came out with a job. So that's where my journey started in the emergency department. So I became an ER tech during my senior year. It really gave me such great opportunity to learn before I became a nurse, right? So at that time at Einstein, the scope of an ER tech was pretty vast. Like I was able to put in IVs and help with various procedures, and just really getting to know the people, the lay of the land,
Mm-hmm.
really understanding how to communicate with folks. You know, you're 22 years old.
Mm-hmm.
It was a wonderful skill to obtain before I graduated. And then, shortly there before I graduated, one of the other clinical nurse managers approached me and said, "Hey, what do you plan on doing when you graduate? Would you want to work here?" And I said, "Oh my gosh, I would love to work here." And he said, "Okay, go up to the nursing office. There's a form by the door, fill it out and hand it in." And just like that, I got
I
my
love
first
it.
nursing job
I love it.
in the emergency department at Einstein. And Einstein offered me so not just knowledge, but just so many opportunities to
Mm-hmm.
continue to grow professionally.
Yeah.
So I had the opportunity to become a charge nurse very early on in my career, very young, and also had the opportunity to become one of their clinical nurse managers when I was 25. So again, I was very young in my career,
Yeah.
but knew that I really was drawn to being a leader because I wanted to support
Yeah.
the people that were around me. And that was
Mm-hmm.
what I really felt most called to do. So I had the opportunity to do that. And while I was doing that, one of the women who was an ER tech at the time, she's now a nurse and is very accomplished. I'm very proud of her for that. Came to me and said, "I know that you love to teach. I know that you enjoy doing that. I go to a nursing school and they're looking for nursing instructors." And I said, "Well, that would be kind of cool."
Yeah, you're like, I'll add that under my
Yeah.
belt.
So I went and I interviewed at Episcopal's nursing school, which is now unfortunately since closed. And ironically enough, the person who I was interviewing with, that was the head of the school, the dean, is now one of my mentors. We
Mm.
still kind of keep touch, but she was also one of the faculty members at Holy Family when I went there.
Hmm.
So again, just really small world, but had the opportunity to go there with a bachelor's degree, which isn't the typical
Right.
level of education that you need to teach. But the women I worked with at that school were just so influential and so willing to help me grow and develop.
Mm.
It was an amazing job. I got to teach in the classroom. I got to teach at the bedside in the surgical trauma ICU at Temple. And I just had wonderful students. It was just really an
Oh,
amazing,
that's
amazing
awesome.
opportunity. But the school closed. So I kind of, maintained teaching there part time, and I was still part time as a nurse at Einstein.
Mm-hmm.
And then my journey there at Einstein kind of continued, where I stayed at the bedside, continue to take care of patients. Really enjoyed what I did. It's a level 1 trauma center, so it was always busy,
Yep.
which was one of the reasons why I wanted to become an ER nurse. I wanted to take care of sick patients, and I wanted to be in a fast-paced environment, and Einstein most certainly met that.
Yeah.
Um, but I started getting that itch again about wanting to be a leader.
Mhm.
And I had a family. I'd recently had my second child, so I had 2 kids. Like, so I was looking for something that would really
Yeah.
kind of meet my personal life, and
Yes.
I think nursing does a really great job at allowing you that opportunity. So I took on a nursing supervisor position at a community hospital,
Mhm.
which was very different. It was in a rural area, so I went from being in a very
Mm.
urban area to a very rural
Mhm.
area. But it taught me so many different perspectives. Here I am an ER nurse. That was a majority of what I knew. But now I'm getting to see all different advantage points of inpatient areas and
Mhm.
having to problem solve in the middle of the night because there's no one else there.
Yeah.
So it really just leveraged my ability to be a strong leader. And I loved every minute of it. And because of that, I decided I really wanted to go back to becoming a manager of an emergency
Mhm.
department. So I did that. I was able to go to be a manager for almost 3 years at a community hospital. And again, learned so much about myself,
Mhm.
learned so much about being a leader. Definitely, I think that something is that's important for folks to know is particularly in any part of nursing, but in leadership for sure, there's always stumbles. You always
Yeah.
learn from things. You're not always
Mhm.
successful at every initiative you try. Um, you're most certainly not infallible, but
Yeah.
you learn so much just by trying, and
Yeah.
doing. So I
Mhm.
had some really great opportunities there. I took over a inpatient rehab area for a little while, just interim. That also was such a wonderful, wonderful experience because here I am an ER nurse
Awesome.
and I'm taking over this rehab area. So just again, a really wonderful opportunity. Again, staying open to opportunities and
Yeah.
being open to enriching your career with different perspectives, folks, units. Really fantastic. But then I started to get the itch again, a lot of itches, to return back to a trauma center. So
Mhm.
started looking again, like, where would I like to go? And I had the opportunity to interview for what was called a clinical operations coordinator at the
Mhm.
time at Thomas Jefferson down here in Center City,
Mhm.
and I loved it. And I was hired for that, and I moved on to there, and I worked night shift. A majority of my career has been night shift, and I loved it. I loved being back in the mix of making
Mhm.
decisions, having kind of all these variables in the air. One of my very close friends, who's also a nurse leader, talks about loving being in the ear because there's so many pieces of the puzzle that you have to put
Yep.
together,
Mhm.
and it's so true. And I loved all the people I work with at that organization, just fantastic folks. And the department itself has just grown and developed, and their volume is booming. And it was just such a wonderful
Yeah.
experience. Um, but then my friends at Einstein called me and they said, "Hey,
We
we have,
miss you.
yes, we have a nursing supervisor position open. We think you'd be really great at it. Why don't you try it?"
Yeah.
And I was like, you know what? I'm really okay here. Like, I feel great
Yeah.
working here at Jefferson, and I really love the people I work with. But I interviewed and then I went back there, and it was almost nice to kind of like return back home.
Yeah.
So I went there, and I went there all during COVID, and for sure some challenges that we faced in a community that most certainly
Mhm.
needed us, and in an organization that doesn't have tons and tons of
Yeah.
resources. At that time, they weren't Jefferson. But just the resiliency and the power of those nurses to come together to take care of these incredibly sick
Yeah.
patients was absolutely beautiful to watch. And it was a blessing for me to be present to see it
Yeah.
and to work with them. So just, I can't say enough about the nurses and everybody who works at Einstein and what they did during the pandemic.
Yeah.
And then my friends from Jefferson called and they said, "Hey, we have these new positions opening. We would really love for you to come back and be part of the team." And I said, "Well,
Mm,
Einstein's kind of closer to my house, and I'm really kind of enjoying
yeah.
my time here." And they said, "Just interview." And I said, "Okay."
You-
So I did. So I interviewed. And I was offered the role for their administrative supervisor on the night shift.
Yeah.
And I said, "Okay, I'm coming back." So I jumped back into the world of Center City's emergency department,
Mhm.
and I loved it there. And I still love it there. I will always feel like it has part of my heart and part of who I am.
I'm sorry to interrupt. I
No.
just am loving this story so much. You're like, I get a call. I didn't want to go. I left my job. And then I go to the new job. I love it. I get
Yes.
another call. I don't want to leave. I love this job. I go. I love it. Like
Yes.
it's so cool to just watch you talk about it because it's just joy. Like it's
Hmm.
just joy and you can tell like nursing has nursing does different things for everybody,
Hmm.
right? And I feel
For
like
sure.
nursing has really just found you and like gifted you the things you needed from it.
Yeah, 100%. I love the word gifted, because I consider what I'm doing two things. I consider it service, like, right? I
Mhm.
always say, like, I'm here to serve or
Mhm.
I'm happy to help because truly that's like who I feel like I am and
Mhm.
why I'm in this space. But it also has provided me, and you hit the nail on the head, like such joy of
Yeah.
getting to know people that I have had the opportunity and the blessing to get to know. When I was at Center City, just the individuals who work there are just, I can't say enough about them.
Yeah.
I always say there's no family like a Jefferson ER family because
Mhm.
it's 100% true. But and that's where my career starts taking a turn, Janae. So I
Yeah.
start noticing, particularly it's right after the pandemic, that the people that I once knew before the pandemic, they've kind of changed in how they respond
Mm.
to stressors or things in the workplace. And I see it with the people that are around me. I'm married to a paramedic. So
Mhm.
naturally, the people that are like in our personal circle are all healthcare providers, pre
Mhm.
hospital folks, so things like that. And even just in that space, I started seeing just the shift in what folks had gone through.
Mhm.
In healthcare, we were kind of thrusted into the pandemic very
Mhm.
unknowingly,
Yep.
and then very quickly thrusted almost like out of it like it didn't happen. And
Right.
for us, it most certainly happened, but we never had that period of time where like
You
folks were
didn't get
staying
to
home,
process.
right? Where like most
Yeah.
folks had that time off where it was like, okay, we're
Yeah.
figuring this out. We were just in do mode and in survival,
Right.
right?
Right.
So I felt like we never really talked about it, really,
Right. There
right?
was no relief period. It was just
Mm-mm.
like, okay, great. You should be grateful that there's not this influx
Yeah,
of COVID patients anymore.
yeah,
Go back to what you were doing before.
yeah.
And it's like,
But
hey,
wait,
I'm a human being. Like
yeah,
I'm experiencing a lot of change. I'm not a robot.
yeah. But there was no space for that.
Mhm.
And it's not to anybody's fault. Like
Yeah.
no one has navigated this, right?
Right.
So I thought to myself, I really enjoy helping to support the people that are around me. That is why I got into nursing leadership because I just really truly enjoyed serving the
Mhm.
people that help to take care of the patients. And I started actually looking into going back to school to get a master's degree in counseling because I thought to myself, like what an amazing pairing my career would be to pair that with counseling and to provide counseling services, supportive
Mhm.
services to nurses,
Yeah.
pre-hospital folks, because I get it. Like I've been through it. I can most
Exactly.
certainly understand what they're going through. And, again, talking about opportunities and circumstance, I'm a member of the Emergency Nurses Association, as you
Mhm.
mentioned. And this one particular year, we had invited nursing students to kind of jump on a question and answer forum kind of meeting where we had ER nurses from all levels, where it was
Mhm.
leadership, bedside, new to practice. And we just had it as an open forum, like ask us whatever you want to know so that you can make an educated decision when
Yeah.
you graduate.
Yeah.
And one nursing student reached out to me and said, "Hey, I want to get a job over the summer at the Jefferson Tarsdale campus because that's where I live near.
Mhm.
But I don't really understand what any of these positions mean because that's one thing we do in healthcare. Like
Mm.
we don't call
Right.
positions
There's
very simple names anymore. There's very like
it's like patient care coordinator.
yes,
Like what
yes.
what?
So she was struggling to find like I don't understand how to
Mhm.
navigate this. I said, no problem, I'll help you. So I went onto the website and I'm looking to try to help her to find a role. And I
Mhm.
find this role called the program manager for nurse well-being. And I thought, oh my gosh, that sounds so interesting.
Ah.
So I'm reading
If you
this.
don't know, this is the job she has right
Yes,
now.
yes.
Okay,
So
go.
I'm like, this sounds like a dream job, right? I'm
Mhm.
reading it. But I will tell you guys that the position, the description of the person that they were looking for in this role did not scream Kristen Gilmore.
Yeah.
And I was like, well, you know what? I'm going to put my
Right.
resume in. I'm going to apply for this anyway. I'm probably never going to hear back from these people,
Mhm.
but I'm going to do it. I didn't tell
Right.
my husband. I didn't tell my best friend. I told no one. I literally that night put in my application.
You're like, who cares?
Yeah.
Like just on a whim.
Yes. 100%. And very shortly thereafter, I got a phone call to interview. And I was like, oh my gosh, wow. And then, you go through like the screening part with human
Mhm.
resources and things like that, and then they move you on. And my first interview was with the CNO. And to me, interviewing with a CNO is probably like a teenager being
Yeah.
interviewed by Taylor Swift. Like this was a
Yeah.
big deal to me. And she's currently my boss now.
Mhm.
And I interviewed with her, Dr. Michelle Connolly, and she was just the most normal, wonderful person.
Don't you love that?
Yes, it was in some ways one of the more easier interviews that I had
Mhm.
during the entire process because it
Mhm.
just felt similar to this, like we were just having
Yeah.
conversations.
Mhm.
So then I continued to interview for probably about 3 months
Okay.
with panels and
Yeah.
various people within the corporate level, within the university level, within the own hospital organization level. Um, and then they called to offer me the job, and I almost didn't take it.
Why? That's like your
I
thing, is
know.
getting offered jobs that are awesome and
I
taking them.
know. So that would have been so unlike me, right? So I was just like, you know what? I love the people who I work with now. I feel like they still need me. Like, I feel like I don't want to leave them. And my husband said to me, like, Kristen, if you don't take this job, you will regret this for the rest
Yeah.
of your career.
Yeah.
And
You'll
he
always
is
wonder.
100% right. Like, this has
Mm.
been, I've been in this role now for shortly over 2 years.
Mm-hmm.
And this has been the most amazing job that I have ever had. And I
Mm.
was actually reflecting on this yesterday, about, how some people say like that they feel like they had a calling to do their job.
Yeah.
I don't know that I ever felt like I had a calling to be a nurse, but now in this role, like I feel like this is my true calling. Like I feel like this is
Yeah.
like really truly what I was meant to be on this earth to be doing, is to be supporting anybody who falls under nursing in a
Yeah.
very different way than we're used to. So
Yeah.
that's where my journey has led me, in a very kind of long road. But in that time, I've just been, my professional life has just been so
Yeah.
enriched because of the people and the patients that I've been exposed to.
Yeah, it sounds it. And I mean, I guess this kind of leads me in.
Mhm.
Before nursing school, what inspired you to be a nurse? What inspired you to take that track?
Yeah, so I didn't want to be a nurse, believe it or not. I actually wanted to be a physician.
Okay.
But then, I just, after thinking about it and considering some things
Yeah.
and trying to figure out like what schools would I go to, I just felt like, what, nursing is probably what would fit me the best.
Yeah.
And that's kind of how I fell into nursing. I knew I wanted to be in the medical profession. I was
Mhm.
very um, interested in science and math. Like those were the things that
Mhm.
I gravitated towards and did very well in. And I didn't live far from Holy Family, which was also very
Yeah.
convenient for me.
Yeah.
Um, so that's kind of how I landed into it, again, kind of just by like almost circumstance. I just knew that I wanted to serve
Yeah.
people in a way. And then nursing really supported me in seeing that through.
Yeah. So now coming back to where you are now, you've always kind of been interested in leadership positions.
Hmm.
They've come to you and it's just the thing that makes you happy and what you like
Hmm.
to do. Where does that come from? Like what inspires you to be a leader?
Oh, that's a good question. I think I've just always been drawn to wanting to support folks.
Mhm.
I'm really into creating structure, and I
Okay.
think that that comes with being a leader. I think that I've also recognized that individuals are more than who they are as an employee. They are humans and they are people. And I really found that I got personal joy in supporting them and helping them through things. Almost as if I'm more of like a problem solver kind of
Yeah.
kind of person. So I think that's why leadership kind of drew me in. But I also wanted to understand more. Like I wanted to
Mhm.
understand more about like how did healthcare work and how did the business side work and how
Yeah.
did the math part kind of like come into it, and all the different things that are beyond
Yeah.
the bedside
Yeah.
but play such a important role in what we do at the bedside.
Mhm. Yeah, I love that answer. How would you say your experience as program manager over the last, 2 years
Hmm.
influenced your perspective on nurse wellness, especially post pandemic?
Hmm. So I think one of the things that I try to maintain consistency with is keeping an open and curious
Mm.
kind of attitude in all things
Mm-hmm.
that I do, right? I've been a nurse for 20 years, so I most certainly could have walked into, the three hospitals that I work at now and assumed
Right.
what their needs were.
Right.
But I most certainly didn't do that. Um, I round and I talk to people and I create relationships. So I think, in doing that, I've been able to really better understand the environments in which the nurses work,
Mm-hmm.
and understand what their needs are. And a lot of times those needs are truly allowing them to voice what they
Yeah.
witnessed.
Yeah.
And something, Janae, that I tell nurses very often, I work a lot with a lot of our new to practice nurses because where I work, there are many new to practice nurses, like
Mm-hmm.
there are across Philadelphia, across the United
Yeah.
States. That's just where we're at right now, post pandemic.
Yeah.
I try to remind folks that the things that we see as nurses, the things that we do, are not normal things, right?
Right.
Most people who are walking down the street don't see what we see in a
Right.
hospital. So I try to allow them the space to appreciate and reflect
Yeah.
on that, and reflect that they are human too.
Right.
and whatever they're experiencing, with that
Right.
is normal, and to
Right.
help them figure out some ways to cope, or to help move them through that,
Right.
and then making sure that they are plugged into resources, which we have tons of, but always knowing that they can come to me.
Yeah.
Anytime I have a conversation with someone, this is another cornerstone of who I am and what I do. It's always confidential and
Yeah.
trusted, unless there's a reason that it can't be.
Right.
um, but I want folks to feel like they can tap into that. So some of the biggest needs I see is that is
Yeah.
having the opportunity to speak to things that they saw.
Mhm.
We talked a little bit about in the beginning of our conversation how, as a nursing group, we were thrusted into the pandemic and then like
Yeah.
pulled back out, take your masks off, you're good to go. But
Mhm.
we never talked about it, right? And
Yeah.
then, now because of that, we see such high levels of, mental health concerns with our, medical
Yeah.
staff. Um, so really making sure they have that space to talk about it.
Mhm.
And then just, really taking a look at what the environment is. Burnout's a really big word right now in
Yeah.
healthcare. And when you look at burnout, a lot of that has to do with the environment, not necessarily the individual.
Oh, yeah. Totally.
Yeah. So we're doing a lot
Totally.
of work around, like, how do we create a healthy work environment? What does that look like?
Yeah.
What is meaningful to you? And that's something that I always try to keep in mind too. And we've done some surveys, and we've asked people things. We're constantly asking them for their feedback, because we want to make sure that we're meeting the expectation of what you want
Yeah.
your environment to be. That's my job as your employer, right? Is to
Mhm.
really create that environment. So those are a few of the things that we do. And then we also ask them, like, what are some things that you want to see in the workplace? What are programs you want to see? What's important to you? So again, just really having that open and
Yeah.
curious attitude to ask them, like, what is meaningful to you, so that we're not missing the mark and assuming
Yeah.
that we know.
Mhm. What programs do you have in place now specifically?
Yeah. So one of the things, I call it the bread and butter of what I do. It's my one-to-one sessions that I have with
Mhm.
individuals. So I do proactive reach outs, which essentially means reaching out to an employee after an incident. And what does an
Yeah.
incident mean? It can mean anything really.
Yeah.
It can be, you're new to practice, or maybe you're not new to practice, but you just experienced your first death of a patient.
Mm.
That's always
Mhm.
very meaningful to folks, of course. Maybe it's a workplace violence event, because unfortunately we have them in healthcare.
Yeah.
Maybe it's a medication error. Maybe it's a fall. Maybe it's a challenging conversation that someone had in the workspace.
Mhm.
Maybe it was just a really hard night.
Right.
um, I have really fantastic relationships with my nurse managers at the 3 hospitals that I cover, and I'm so thankful for them. That they'll send me an email and be like, hey, this individual seemed to be just not themselves, or, there was an incident last night. So I'm able to use that information to follow up with
Mhm.
people. But I also have kind of a structure in place where, if somebody puts in an incident report related to something, I have access to that.
Right.
Um, if there is an alert called for workplace violence, I have access to that.
Yeah.
And then I also have access to every nurse's schedule and phone number
Oh,
within
good.
our 3 hospitals. So I'm able to make sure that I'm not calling them
Yeah.
2 hours after they went to sleep because they worked night
Right.
shift. And I have access to their phone numbers to be able to contact them directly. So that's one of the programs, is our proactive reach out. And I'll tell you, 2023, Janae, was my first like full year in the role.
Yeah.
And I was able to independently, proactively reach out to over 500 nursing
That's
employees. Yeah,
awesome.
to touch base with them to make sure that they were okay. So that's one of the programs. And it's one of the things, again, that I think are really just so special and important and
Yeah.
individualized, right? I'm not their manager calling.
Right.
I'm not
Exactly.
investigating anything. I'm just truly invested in them and wanting
Right.
to make sure that they're okay. We also have some really fun programs that are really developed around reducing stress
Mhm.
in the workplace. One of them is our pet therapy program.
Yay.
Yes, it's one of my most favorite programs. We're fortunate enough to have a pet therapy program at Jefferson, Frankfurt, Bucks, and Tarsdale that is a nurse-facing program. So what
Mhm.
does that mean? It means that it's truly there for the nursing staff.
Yeah.
We of course will visit patients and
Yeah.
whoever, but it's really meant to be like we schedule it to go to the nursing units for the
Mhm.
nurses to experience and be exposed to that. We
Yeah.
have 13 dogs as part of our pet therapy team, and we do about 30 hours of pet therapy every month. So
Oh,
almost every
nice.
day there's a dog somewhere
Yeah.
with me rounding on the nurses.
Yeah.
We hit day shift, we hit night shift,
Mhm.
we visit on the weekends sometimes. We really try to
Yeah.
make sure that the programs that we do don't just touch people who
Yeah.
work day shift, because
Right.
unfortunately sometimes that happens. So that's always been in our perspective.
Mhm.
And we actually did a really short study on mood perception with pet therapy last year.
Mhm.
And what we found is we almost had a 100% increase in how the nurses perceive themselves and their mood
Yeah.
after pet
After.
therapy. Yeah. And
That's
how it impacted, yeah,
awesome.
and how it impacted their patient care, which was it helped me take better care of my patients by
Yeah.
being exposed to this. So just so much wonderful work and outcomes coming
Yeah.
out of that program. We have a lot of great feedback with that. So pet therapy is most certainly fantastic. We're also blessed at Jefferson here in Pennsylvania to have a grant from the Hospital Association for Pennsylvania
Mhm.
to help us with some music therapy exposure. So right
Oh,
now I work.
cool.
Yeah, it's really neat. Right now I have a music therapist that I work very closely with. Her name's Allie McCrae. We She's just fantastic. But we have been able to really expand what music therapy looks like. She's a board certified music therapist. She works part time and she exposes our Pennsylvania hospitals to different kind of modalities of
Yeah.
music therapy. And it looks different in every space that we go to, but we really try to coordinate to make sure we've hit every single Pennsylvania Jefferson hospital at this point.
Nice.
It's been the grant has been allowing us to expose nurses to this since 2021, so it's been very
Yeah.
generous. And right now we are at Methodist, and we're going to also be at our Sidney Kimmel Cancer Center at
Nice.
Carsdale. But we've done a student program where we've had students kind of become part of this. We've gotten some really great data as it relates to resiliency because of the music therapy program. So music therapy has been really fantastic for our nurses. And then we also have like things that are like related to creative arts. Like we have these really huge coloring murals that we have on the walls where people
Oh,
can color them
cool.
in. We gotten really great feedback for that. And as a part of the grant that funds my role, we've been able to partner with nurses to create spaces in the hospital for them to go to for like respite, rejuvenation,
Mhm.
a moment of pause and quiet.
Yeah.
We call them respite rooms. You heard a lot about them during COVID, like Zen
Yeah.
dens, those kind of things.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
But what I've done with the nurses is at each location is kind of sat down with a group of people and said, what do you want to see in these rooms? And then
Yeah.
find it for me and tell me what it looks like. So
Yeah.
really bringing them in to curate what this
Right.
room looks like. So
Right.
we have massage chairs in each room. There's aromatherapy.
Yeah.
I've curated some yoga, some mindfulness meditation, some QR code stuff. So like they can really do a gamut of different things
Yeah.
because everybody has different levels of
Yeah.
what they want to do.
Yeah.
Another wonderful thing that we're able to do is I have had the amazing opportunity to partner with our nurse residency coordinator to find a place for nurse well-being in almost every single like seminar that they do
Oh,
with our
good.
new nurses.
Good.
So it's been really important to me since I started this role to make sure that I'm meeting the nurses like from the moment they enter into our
Yep.
building. So they
Mhm.
see me on nursing orientation, they learn who I am, they learn what I do, they get my business card, and then they see me in nurse residency, which is shortly
Right.
thereafter. The hope is that you can change that culture of,
Yeah.
you know, how I grew up in nursing, which was like pull your big girl pants up and keep it moving.
Right.
And we know that that doesn't do us well emotionally
Yeah.
and mentally. So really trying to change that, to break that stigma, to have folks be more comfortable talking about their well-being.
Yeah.
So I meet with them almost every cohort, and we usually have 2 or 3 cohorts going at a time.
Yeah.
And they end every session with me with building mindfulness and meditation practices.
Nice.
I am it's called SMART. So I'm a SMART certified practitioner. SMART is stress management and resiliency training.
Okay.
It's through Benson Henry Institute at one of the Harvard medical schools. And it's something that I teach, but now we've integrated it into our nurse residency program so that they get pieces of it.
I love that.
Yeah. So the hope is that we're providing them also with some tools to kind of
Yeah.
help them, when they're feeling overwhelmed, when they're feeling
Yeah.
stressed, and to kind of shift their change in thinking. So we've been able to do a lot of that stuff over the past 2 years, and then of course, having the opportunity to work at Jefferson's amazing, and we're doing tons of work from an organizational perspective on well-being. So having the opportunity to be a voice in that has been really
Yeah.
wonderful. To be able to give a nursing perspective in that
Mhm.
space and to hopefully help the organization kind of change what we're doing in a well-being
Yeah.
space.
Well, and it's nice too because it sounds like you're not just, the girl on the side that's like, "Hey, I'm your counselor if you need
Yeah,
it." And then you're telling the nurses like just kind of like how it was in COVID when it was like, "Okay, well, yeah, you could sit in this meditation room, but I need you right now."
yeah.
So you have to like the room can be there, but if no one can use
If
it,
there's no space, yeah.
if there's no space, emotional space as
Hmm.
well, like if you don't feel emotionally like you can take the space
Hmm.
to go there, then you're never going to
Yeah,
use it. So it's nice that you're at the foundation of these new nurses and being like, "Hey, this is a thing. Like it's real. You can have
it's
it."
important.
Yeah, and it's important.
And I also tell them, Janae, maybe it's a space you want to go before you come into your shift. Like maybe it's a
Yeah.
space you want to go so you can just get yourself centered and you can be like, I'm going to have
Mhm.
a really great day today. Or
Mhm.
maybe it's a space you go after your shift because maybe you are like, you know what, I don't want to go home with all that
Yeah.
hustle and bustle that I just
Right.
experienced. I just need to like sit down for maybe 15 minutes and just,
Right.
get myself back to like the human
Right.
person who I am.
Right.
So I tell them they can really utilize it in any
Mhm.
way that fits them best.
Yeah, exactly. So, how do you see the role of nurse well-being evolving in the coming years?
So I think this role can really be a pivotal um, moment for nursing. I think that we have seen what COVID has done. I think that it, I don't think I think COVID was the way that we realized it, but I
Yes.
think it's been going on for longer than the
Yep.
pandemic.
I would agree with that.
I think that there's been such a movement in the nursing profession. You see this with professional organizations, like the Emergency Nurses Association, the
Mhm.
AACN. Everybody's now coming out with standards for a healthy work environment. So I think
Mhm.
it's really coming to the forefront of we have to take care of the nurse as a human so that they can continue to take care of our patients.
Yes.
I always say you have to make sure that your cup is filled before you fill the
Yep.
cup of others. You can't help anybody
Mhm.
from an empty cup. Um, so I think that having roles like this is so important to
Yeah.
invest in your nurses. And it's not just important for local hospitals, right? It's important for the profession because we need to continue, as a profession to advocate
Yeah.
for the well-being of our nurses. And who better to do it than nurses ourselves,
Right,
right?
exactly.
And I think roles like this can really be so instrumental. I
Mhm.
always say if at the end of the week I can say that I was able to reach one nurse and truly help
Mhm.
them, then my job has been well worth it.
Right. Well, that's 52 nurses a year.
Yeah,
Like, what a difference that
yep,
can make.
and helping them stay in the workforce or better understanding what's going on in their environment. So as a
Yeah.
leadership person, we can
Yeah.
fix it. And I think that that's what's really nice about this role too, is having a leadership background. I also understand kind of the mechanics of that piece. I
Yeah.
understand the leadership role. I understand, we're also really starting to look very deeply into how do we take care of our nurse leaders, right?
Yeah.
Because
Yeah.
they all have an equally as challenging job, very
Right.
different from being at the bedside.
Mhm.
But there's a lot of pressure. And how do we make sure they're taking care of themselves?
Right.
Because we need them there to be strong leaders, to lead
Right.
our nurses so they can take care of
Right.
our patients. So, really taking a moment to recognize how important the role is, not just for the bedside nurse, but for
Mhm.
the entire continuum
Right.
of well being within the hospital. So, I think it's really important. I'm hopeful that other hospitals, other organizations will see value in this type of
Yeah.
role and will adopt it, knowing that, it's so wonderful to have a person who you can just be like, hey, I know you're having a really
Yeah.
hard day today. Why don't you go talk to Kristen?
Yeah.
And it works.
I love that.
Yeah.
And it's so nice to see your progression. Like, you're still, because obviously Jefferson and Einstein are now together, and
Yeah.
it's like you're starting in Einstein, and then Jefferson, and Einstein, and then
Hmm.
Jefferson, and now it's all one, and it's like it was just made for you.
Yeah, and it's really nice too because my hospitals that I'm assigned to, of course, are what we call the Jefferson Northeast Hospital, so the Bucks, the
Mhm.
Franklin Tarsdale ones. But like, I still am very supportive
Yeah.
and helpful to anybody who reaches out to me for anything. Like, it could be an
Exactly.
idea, it could be like, hey, we're seeing a change here on our unit. Do you have any ideas? Different committees, different groups, different platforms. I'm always happy to talk to
Yeah.
anyone, anywhere to
Yeah.
support them,
I
and it
can
doesn't
see
even
that.
need to be in Jefferson. Like, we
I
connected on
know. I'm
LinkedIn.
I'm literally thinking to myself, I'm like, if I ever need anything, I know Kristen's there for me.
Yes. And that's who I love to be. I love for people
Yeah.
to reach out and be like, "Hey, I need some help. I need a rope. I'm struggling."
Mhm.
Or, "What are your thoughts on this?" So I
Yeah.
think that having somebody in a role like this is just, vital to the
Yeah.
continuation of our workforce.
Definitely. Is there anything else on the topic of like your role or anything that you want to specifically share before I start diving into you as a person?
I think just to share with folks who maybe work at different organizations, that this role, I'm fortunate enough that the role that I'm in has been funded through a grant. So there are ways to make sure that you're able to, as an organization, fund roles like these. I think there's tons of options out there, and I think there's always folks that are very willing to explore those. So if you're someone who works in an organization or a hospital and you think that this is the type of role that you would love to
Mhm.
have. I think exploring any avenue that you
Yeah.
can to make that happen would just be such a benefit to the folks that work within
Yeah.
your hospital or within your organization. So I think the more folks that know that these roles exist, the more that we can advocate for having them in all the hospitals. And I think in doing so, we'll see a shift in our retention. I think we'll see a shift in
Yeah.
the well being of our nurses. And I think we'll see a shift in the amount of time people are staying at the bedside because we know right now people aren't staying at the bedside very
Yeah.
long.
Well, and I would vouch, and I'd love to hear your opinion on it, but I would vouch that now is the perfect time. Like, if you have any curiosity
Hmm.
on getting into nurse wellness and
Yeah.
leadership, now is the perfect time because we're finally opening these roles post COVID after talking about it, 2021,
Hmm.
2022. And like you said, you entered in 2023 into this
Hmm.
role, and it was a new role, and
Hmm.
people are like, Kristen, what exactly do you do?
all the time.
Yeah. Like, so if anyone's curious, now is the time, like, to just let that curiosity run
Yeah.
because you never know what role could be there.
Yeah, and I want folks to know that, there is no cookie cutter role. Like this is a
Yeah.
very new role in healthcare. Coming into it, I kind of just have molded it and created it into what works best for us at our organization. I just recently got a partner over at the Abington and Lansdowne hospitals at Jefferson, so I'm
Nice.
excited. She just started 4 weeks ago.
Yay.
Her program might look a lot like mine, but it might be very different. It really has to be what works best for your hospital.
Right.
But to your point, now is the time to strike while the
Yeah.
iron's hot. Like this is a big time, a big topic, and there's a big need for it.
Yeah. And like you mentioned, like if you have a desire and ideas, it's so malleable right now as well
Hmm.
because it is so new. So, there'll be no harm in entering these roles later either,
No.
but just entering now, like if you're passionate about something
Hmm.
like this, you have a lot of leeway to mold it into
Oh
something
yeah,
that's really beneficial to the nurses.
and it's fun, right? It's fun getting to create something that
Yeah.
is directly benefiting
Yeah.
the people that you truly care about, and
Yeah.
you get to be creative. So if you're someone who's creative and you're someone who's really into well-being and you're interested, I think now is the time to really jump into it.
I love that.
Yeah.
So, now I just want to know about you
Okay.
personally. So, what's working really well in your life right now?
Oh gosh, what's working really well? So in my personal life, I'm almost done right now. So um, I wanted to kind of elevate what I'm doing
Mhm.
in a well-being role, but trying to look at it a little differently. So I'm actually in courses right now to become a board certified nurse coach.
Okay.
So yeah,
Cool.
so I'm almost done my clinicals, and I'll actually be finished probably in the beginning of November. So I'll be able to sit and take
Mhm.
my board. So I'm really excited for that. It's a board certification. It's something I can work as a nurse. It's not just coaching for just like nurses. I can coach
Yeah.
anyone. It's called a board certified nurse coach because I am a nurse.
Right.
But I have worked with a lot of nurses so far in my clinical space, and I've really enjoyed pairing with them. Um, Helping them, achieve goals as it relates
Yeah.
to either professional things, personal things, whatever that is. So I feel like it pairs really well with what I'm doing professionally,
Yeah.
and it's given me kind of a different skill set. And I've
Mhm.
gotten to meet people like from all over the United States, being as part of this nurse coach collective that I'm in. So I really have enjoyed that.
Yeah.
And I, was able to reflect yesterday and talking to someone just about, it's about like an 8 month course about, how I feel that I've even improved, even in my own willingness and
Yeah.
comfortability and willing to be vulnerable in that space. But that's going really well now. I'm really excited for that. Um, my home life is delightful. I have 2 children. I'm married.
I
I'm
love
truly
it.
blessed. So that's wonderful as well. But yeah, those are things that are going really well in my life.
I love that. So, along that vein, what are you most self-confident about?
I am most self confident about supporting folks.
Mhm.
Um, like I mentioned earlier, I really feel like that's a calling for me.
Mhm.
It's in my personal life. I feel like I'm that person for my friends, the people that are around me. I feel like people look to me for advice, whether that's professional or personal.
Yeah.
And I feel like in my workspace, I'm very successful in connecting with people. I try every day to develop that. I try every day to provide, that space for people to feel that they can come and share.
Yeah.
Sometimes I say, sometimes you have to cry, sometimes you have to scream, sometimes you just want to talk. That's
Mhm.
fine. So I feel like that's, where I'm at right now.
I love that. So, what has become clearer to you as you've gotten older?
I think the importance of knowing who you are,
Mhm.
almost kind of creating your own value set of like who I am and what I stand
Yeah.
for. Because I think, especially today, social media can be so influential, right? You
Yep.
have so many different perspectives, and it's a blessing in some ways, right? Like
Yeah.
you get to see things and experience things that perhaps you would have never had it not existed.
Yep.
But sometimes it can also skew who you think you should be.
Yeah.
So I think, really identifying like who you want to be, trying to achieve that. Um, I think is really important, having those kind of core values of who you are.
Yeah. What would you say your core values are?
I would say that I think that faith, and take that however you want to. I think
Yeah.
having just faith, for me, it's just faith in that everything works
Yeah.
itself out.
Mhm.
Um, that you have to kind of really stay focused in the moment and in the
Yeah.
present and try to just move through things and knowing that everything in the end is going to be okay. So I
Yeah.
think faith would be a really great core value that I would choose for myself. I think kindness, I always say you have to lead with
Mm-hmm.
kindness. I tell my kids that all the time, like the kindness you put into the world
Comes
is
back to you.
100%.
Mm-hmm.
It does. It truly does. Um, so I think that those would be my two biggest core values is your faith and kindness for sure.
I love that.
Yeah.
I really like that. So, one of the reasons we connected and the whole reason we're here is nurse built well-being, and our tagline here is taking care of nurses so nurses can take care of you, which you even said before, like it just, you can't take care of others if you're not well,
Yeah.
right? So, you know if you could talk to all the employers in the nursing industry, what would you advise them to do to better support their nurses?
I think, Janae, in nursing, we do such a fantastic job from a professional space. Like for many
Yeah.
organizations, we have robust orientation processes.
Mm-hmm.
Nurse residency has become a really great space that for our new nurses to develop in. They get really wonderful on unit orientations, tons of educational opportunities, right? So as a professional nurse, you're really provided with all the tools you need,
Yeah.
right? But we don't address the human part of them, right? Like
Yep.
we don't talk about the challenges you might face. And if we do, it's very superficial, right? Like we're
Right.
not I feel like there's some, definitely have some opportunities for us to address that. I think, trying to incorporate that humanistic piece is really an opportunity for us in healthcare. I did mention what we're doing for our nurse leaders. We've pivoted completely and have really started doing some very out of the box and different kind of retreats for them and really looking at how do we serve you as
Mm-hmm.
a leader and how do we make sure that your well-being is at the forefront, right?
Right.
So really also taking a look at your leadership team. You rely so heavily on them to make sure that your hospital's running day to day and making sure
Right.
that you're meeting all the financial requirements, legal requirements, all the things, but really investing in them. So I think, organizations really need to invest in their leaders.
Mm-hmm.
And, I think having roles like mine is, again, we can revisit that, is just so important to make sure that you just have a handle on what the environment looks like for your staff. You have someone who's able to kind of inform you of that. You have
Mm-hmm.
a trusted member of your community who's able to
Mm-hmm.
support your staff in a different way. So I think just being very creative as well in what
Yeah.
the future looks like for healthcare. Um, and I always tell the new nurses this, I need you to be here in the next 40 years. So that means that we have to take care of you so that you can be
Yeah.
here.
Mm-hmm.
So I think, again, truly, truly investing in them as humans, recognizing that there's this holistic component, right? Like
Yeah.
there's all these different dimensions and they all play into each other. So really making sure that we hit all those dimensions to support that person is really important.
Yeah. As you were talking about that, it kind of reminded me of the old phrase of like, people don't leave bad jobs, they leave bad managers.
Mhm.
And if you're running your leadership team so hard, right, because you need the nurses to do well, like your nurses need support from their leader.
Mhm.
So it just funnels down and it
Mhm.
always does. So I think that's a great point that you made of like we're making all these wellness initiatives, and some of them are going well, some of them could use work,
Mhm.
and that's why roles like yours exist.
Mhm.
um but I think it's just a really interesting note and important to say like everybody needs it. It's
Mhm.
not just your floor nurses that need it. Like your nurse leaders are greatly impacting what your bedside nurses are able to do and how
Absolutely.
well they feel like they're able to do their job.
Mhm.
And it's everybody needs that support.
Yeah, you're
So,
100% right. Yeah. So
yeah.
I think in nurse leaders, sometimes I think before, they used to get forgotten about, right? Because it was
Yeah,
like,
of
hey,
course.
they're here, they're leading our
Right.
teams.
You're the one that's supposed to be supporting me,
Yeah.
so you're good.
Yeah. So, but if they're not good, your team's
Right.
not good.
Right.
So it's really making sure that you highlight their well-being as well and checking in with them and
Yeah.
allowing them the
Yeah.
opportunity to be vulnerable and to
Yeah.
share what they're going through.
Yeah. Yeah. And then that allows them to also talk up as well. Like if you're talking about a funnel, like you said, they're a trusted individual.
Hmm.
So if they're well, they can talk up to their people and go, hey, like my team is this, this, this,
Hmm.
they need this, or like we're struggling with this, or hey, just want to say thank you, this,
Hmm.
this. It facilitates that communication as well because
Yeah.
people are feeling good, better
Hmm.
patient outcomes, like all that stuff.
hmm they feel like they have the opportunity to communicate in a
Yeah.
way that's open and honest.
Yeah. So on that note, what makes a great life?
Oh gosh, what makes a great life? I think a great life has a foundation in finding joy every day. I think it's in recognizing that there's always something new and good in your day, right? We all woke
Mhm.
up this morning, hopefully, and
Mhm.
that's a new thing for
Mhm.
us, right? Every day is new. Every day is an opportunity to move forward and create whatever you want to create in your life. Um, I shared with you my story, and again, it was all because of opportunities and other people.
Yeah.
So I think also a great life is one being open to meeting folks and connecting with them. That's who we are as humans, um, and really finding out who you are in that and in the crazy world. So I think just embracing every day as new and being
Yeah.
thankful. I think showing gratitude really is important. Um, and I think having people close to you, because I think as humans, that's something that we thrive for and we desire. And I think that those are all things that make a really great life.
Yeah.
And dogs.
Always
And
dogs.
dogs.
The studies have shown it's dogs.
Answer leads back to dogs.
Well, Kristen, thank you so much for coming
Oh,
in.
yes,
It was such a
absolutely.
treat to talk about this and also to kind of keep permeating this conversation that nurse wellness is important and it is valued, and there are roles opening, and there's really great work being done because it's a key part of what nursing is.
Hmm.
Like, you are giving so much support to others. Your whole We were talking earlier before we even started, like, nursing is a trade, it's a skill,
Hmm.
and you have to rest in order to be able. Someone said this to me before. They're like, you need to pull back the arrow before you can let it go, but you need to give yourself time to wind back.
Hmm.
If you don't have any wellness and no mindfulness, you're going to pull it just a little. It's not going to go
Yeah.
very far. And I'm just grateful that you could come in, with your new role and all these things that you're
Yeah.
doing and be able to make time to do this.
Well, I'm so grateful that you invited me.
Oh,
I'm very
yeah.
humbled. And I'm just so happy that we're able to speak about the work that I do. My hope is in doing, webinars and podcasts and meeting with folks and speaking with individuals, that we're able to put that information out there to people, that
Yeah.
roles like this are possible. They're fiscally possible.
Yeah.
And the return on investment is remarkable.
Yeah.
So thank you again for having me. And I'm so excited to be able to share my role and what I do in the nursing world with everyone.
Absolutely. Well, and thank you guys for watching. Stay tuned every week. You know the drill. But Pinnacle Healthcare Staffing, get to know a nurse. Today was Kristen. Tomorrow might be you. Thank you guys so much. Have a great week.